shake your dreams from your hair. I'm already there, right beside you. So please, don't hide, just say I'll be there if it breaks, right beside you. Suddenly I know now how it feels. I no longer have to beg or steal. I can stand out on this higher ground, where love is just a sound, where love is...
We're off to a good start this morning. Good morning, everyone. Happy Sunday. And of course, my internet had to crap out within the first 2 seconds of me coming up on the screen. I'm having a Chris moment, I guess. I don't know if any of you follow Fat Man Nation and watched the Fat Man's show on August, was it on the 2nd? And he was having internet issues. And it's funny to see in the comments, they all blame Canada for Canadian internet issues, but he's definitely in the States and was having the same issues that I at times have. Hopefully this is the one and only time that it's going to be this little glitch. So good morning, everyone. Those of you who are in Canada, happy long weekend. It is a civic holiday on Monday for many people. Are gone to cottages, so thank you for coming and watching. If you have the time, I appreciate it. We had a pretty busy weekend ourselves. We were at the drive-in again last night. Seems to be not necessarily every weekend thing, because they tend to, like, when they have big movies, they'll like play the same ones a couple weekends in a row. But as some of you that followed last week, we went and watched Deadpool on release night, and we're huge Deadpool fans here. And so again, last night they were playing it at the drive-in, so we decided to go check it out there. And it was a pretty late night because it was the second movie, so they'll do double features. So the first movie plays when it starts dark. It's like at 8:55, and then it's more of a kids movie. And then the second movie started probably around 10:45. So by the time I got to bed last night, it was like around 1:30, 2 a.m. So yeah, it was a tough morning to get up this morning to join all of you. Let's see who we got in the chat. So, speaking of the Fat Man, we got Fat Man's first. Good morning. We have Autumn Summers. Good morning. Tammy, of course. Our very loyal follower. Good morning, Tammy. Tammy's actually local here too, in the Ottawa area. And then we have good morning, Shay, House of Geckos. Wow, there's actually quite a few of you in this morning. Definitely not here to see me. I'm thinking you're all here to see David. Natty's Micro Pets, good morning. We're in the middle of a solar storm that could be affecting the internet. Oh, that could be. I know it's been kind of wonky the last couple days. I don't know how long that's kind of spanning for, but I think most people are just going to blame it that we're in the middle of the country on a farm, and Elon Musk can only do so much with his internet. We do have the fancy one, but hey, I guess if it's satellite, solar storm makes sense. And then we have Cassandra in the house. Good morning, Cassandra. Thanks for joining in. So yeah, it's been a busy weekend. Definitely an interesting one. I don't know if you guys saw a post I was tagged in yesterday, and that's going to be my tea for today. So let me just hop in the little video. All right, so some of you probably remember a little while, I guess several episodes back, that I participated in the 15 Minutes of Lame. I did my interview with the Fat Man. My husband did the contest last year. And last year, the campaigning started in the fall. Right? You're really campaigning. The public popularity vote is during December. It starts, I think, December 1st. And then, so 25% of the votes is like the public vote, popularity vote, and then the other 75% are split between three judges. So they started the campaign like when the contest launched, after all the competitors had already done their interviews. For this year, people are really jumping on board early. So we're in August, and there's already been at least a couple weeks now that I've seen stuff. I think actually Charlie over at Regan Renee has been posting stuff since after his interview, so it's been a while. So yesterday, he's doing smear campaigns against other competitors. So they did a video. He did a video against me, which was it was pretty funny. So if you have a chance to go check out on Instagram, Regan Renee Reptiles, he has his smear campaign against Gecko Diva. And I have to say, great job. It's really funny. He took clips from the interview that I did, and he also took clips from one of our episodes of Coffee and Cresties, and made it work really, really well. I didn't have a chance to set it up to be able to show you guys because I saw it late last night. But I will definitely share it to my story later on so you guys can see it on Instagram because it is really funny. Good morning, Bash Coder. Nice to see you. Thanks for being in the chat and joining us this morning. Yeah, so VIP, my husband, you should have shown it. I know, I just didn't have a chance to download it and get it all set up. But it is really funny. And so I'm letting everybody know my campaign is not going to start until the fall. So I'm already starting to do recording and videos and getting everything set. I have a whole strategy and an idea of what I'm going to do. But it's not going to be till the end of November that I'm going to launch it. So you won't see anything from me for that. But I will, after this video, I'm going to go in the description and I'm going to link the documentary. For those of you who don't know what it is, Leviathan did a really good documentary on the 15 Minutes of Lame contest. And yeah, it's an awesome documentary, and I think I encourage everyone to go check it out. It's pretty neat, and it kind of explains exactly how it started and what it's all about. And so then you'll have a better idea of what I'll be campaigning for come fall. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. There's nothing else really. It's been a busy week, and I think we'll go right into our guest. So let's bring that up. Here we go. Good morning, David. How are you?
Good morning. How are you? I'm doing well.
Good. We have you bright and early this morning. I had to check last night to see if you were in a different time zone, but I was pretty sure that you were the same time zone as what we are.
Yeah, I'm Eastern, so I'm good over here. It's 9 a.m. I'm usually up by this time anyway.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. So then you didn't purposely wake up to come and join this, this
No.
podcast today. So, I mean, you're a household name. Everyone who's in geckos knows Tiki's Geckos. I mean, they see your videos. You're really popular online. Maybe just share like a little bit about how you got started into this, how long you've been doing it, where the name came from. I think that over the years, all that kind of gets faded away, and then people kind of forget all the info, and the new people that are coming in are picking up, the last year or so of videos and really having to dig deep to kind of find out more information. So it might be fun to kind of share.
Yeah, so I started breeding and I started the business in 2011,
Okay.
basically when I was right out of high school. So I've always just had a passion for reptiles and animals in particular. And when I moved to the United States, I had my aunt married an American guy that he used to
Okay.
breed pythons. He used to breed like snakes, boas, and pythons. And he saw my passion for animals and reptiles. Originally it all started with dinosaurs. I think that's where a lot of us get our like
Yeah.
our first passion from. But so we went to a reptile show. I was obsessed with like everything there, obviously. Then we went home, and a couple weeks later, he sent me a bearded dragon, and that's what just started the whole thing for me. Like as a kid, you get a bearded dragon. I originally wanted an iguana, but he
Okay.
he sent me a bearded dragon because he knew it'd be like a better pet.
Yeah.
And yeah, that just, from there I just started getting different like reptiles. I've had and worked with a lot of different species of animals and not just reptiles, but so I had a lot of different things coming in. And one year I remember going to a Repticon show in Orlando, Florida, and there was some guy there that had a table full of crested geckos, and I passed by and he let me hold what was the first crested gecko I ever saw. And I still remember, it was a red phantom female with a nice big head structure. And when I just held this thing, I was like obsessed. So I didn't, I didn't have money or anything, so I couldn't buy anything there.
Yeah.
But I went back home and I just like remembered Crested Gecko, Crested Gecko, Crested Gecko.
Write it down.
Yeah, I didn't have a phone or anything either. So I was just like, okay, I was like Crested Gecko. When I got home, I went on the computer and I just Googled it, and the rest is history. That was where the obsession began.
Good morning, good gecko. My husband says, like, so he does, well, pythons. He says, I don't know geckos, but I know Tiki's geckos. Well, like for us too, like we were dinosaur crazy. Like I know I was dinosaur crazy when I was young, right? But I never really had reptiles when I was young until our daughter wanted a snake. So we got into ball pythons, and that's how it started for us, right?
Yeah.
Um, but when you first get into it, you see like the first thing you want to do is do the research and look into it because you just kind of obsess about it and want to know more, right?
Yeah.
And for us, like he's saying, like we knew Tiki's geckos because you're all over YouTube. So
Yeah.
what made you decide to really like get into doing videos online, and like how did that come about for you?
Yeah, so I wish I could say I had this like 10-year plan that I knew that it would pay off in the end, but it wasn't like that. Initially, I just wanted to have like a care guide or like a basic um video for people to watch that were customers of mine, that instead of explaining the same thing over and over to like everybody, I wanted to
Yeah,
have a video that I could just send them that, okay, this is how we do it. This is how we keep our geckos. And as people started asking me more questions, I just started making the videos for the questions they were asking me, and I would just send them the video link. And I still do this to this day. The DM that I get the most is like, "What morph is my gecko?" or like, something
yeah.
like that. So I just like send them the video, or yeah, I send them the link to the video.
Yeah.
But that's originally why I started making these videos, because I just wanted to make it easier to answer everybody's question instead of repeating myself.
Yeah. And when did it switch where it was, more of the like educational, I guess, videos to where you're like doing more fun videos and like showing more of the different aspects, I guess, of your business and different animals that you're working with?
So it's a gradual change, because of course initially it's very hard like to be on camera, and if you look back at like my first couple videos, it's very awkward and cringy because I'm an introvert at heart. I don't, like my wife will tell you, I don't really like going out. I don't like partying or anything like that. I just like keeping to myself, staying home. But so it's at first I was just thinking like very like straightforward, educational, like what do they need? But as I started, getting more comfortable with YouTube and everything, and as YouTube starts evolving and, people, they don't just want to watch something educational, they want to watch something funny or something that's a little bit more dynamic. I
Yeah.
started just integrating that into the video slowly, and Manny hopped on very early with the YouTube, and since he was, he's like my best friend, so it was easy to bounce things off of him, and we could go
Yeah.
be like more of ourselves on camera. Slowly but surely, we started like just expressing ourselves a little bit more. So
That's
it's a
awesome.
gradual.
Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, when you're doing more, you get it like more fun stuff and different things that tend to get like more views, right? And then you're able to, because you
Yeah.
have quite a bit of subscribers on your channel. Like it's definitely what it's over 100,000, I think, is what you have.
Yeah.
What's your most viewed video? Like seems to attract?
So, funny enough, my most viewed video have nothing to do with geckos. They're snake people videos. So,
Really?
my most viewed like long form YouTube is a video I did with Tyler Nolan, and he's
Okay.
like this crazy tattoo guy that has a bunch
Follow
of
Tyler.
venomous.
I know who Tyler is.
Okay, well, so Tyler's a buddy of mine, and he doesn't live too far from me. But the first time I went to his place, I did like a tour of his, animals, and that's
Mhm,
my longest viewed video, or my most viewed video, with the long form, and my
mhm.
longest viewed are the short form content is a hognose video where it's my buddy Eslin, and there's a hognose that bit him, and he just shows how to get it off,
Oh.
and that has like 3 point something million views,
Oh,
and it's a
wow.
short. Yeah.
That's crazy. So yeah, I mean, I know like a lot of people, like there's a lot of new people that are coming in and they're seeing all this content online, right? So yeah, especially like when we first got into ball pythons, like there's so many different podcasts and ball python
Uh,
channels and such. Like snake videos, definitely I found are a lot more common than the gecko stuff. Like the gecko stuff, you have to be a little, it's more niche stuff, right? You have the gecko pod now, and then we have your stuff, and it's not, there's not a whole bunch. I think there's a couple. Gecko Cove is another one that's new. Oh, my
yeah.
husband just popped and said, "What's he saying?" Tyler Nolan seems like a great guy, crazy but a nice guy. Yeah, we really enjoy his content. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, yeah. Tyler's a nice guy for sure. He's
um,
crazy
what?
for sure, but
Well, I mean, to handle some of the animals he has, and for us, it's been kind of neat to follow the journey because he's been starting the farm, right, with all the farm animals, and we're on a farm, so we already have all the animals. So
yeah,
it's kind of neat to see like him going through that experience, and it's like, oh, that's kind of how we were when we were going through the reptile experience. It's the
yeah,
full opposite. Um, as a new person, and a lot like some of the people who are watching are newer online and new content creators, do you have any tips or tricks that you could share that have helped you be successful in building content and that you could share with everybody else?
yeah. One thing I could say is follow trends. So like, if there's a if there's a hot topic in the community, in that moment, it's good to strike when the iron's hot and make a video about it. Not wait too long. Like,
Yeah.
when the cappuccinos came out, everybody's talking about cappuccinos, so I made a cappuccino video. When the market started being very wonky and it started slowing down and, it started regulating, I made a video about that. That was a lot of people viewed that video. So, keep an eye on the trend, keep an eye on the community and see what people are talking about, especially what gets people very emotional because,
Mhm.
our I mean, social media nowadays has pushed people to be very like extreme with certain views, and
Yeah.
that transfers over to like everything, our hobby, politics, everything. So
Hmm.
when you could kind of like poke at that a little bit, you could gain a reaction, and it's gonna make people want to watch a video more.
Yeah.
So obviously, without I'm not I some people would say I'm controversial on certain things. I don't think I'm controversial at all. Like compared to like I test the boundaries. I'll push here and there, but I'm not like
Mhm.
saying crazy things here. But it's good to
Well,
like always push the envelope a little bit and have people thinking, in my
well, like
opinion.
I know that there was that whole thing with that black gecko that kind of blew up in the Facebook group
Oh
pages,
yeah.
right? Like that was
Hmm.
a little wild. Did we ever get like any updated stuff from that? Because I know you were in talks with them.
Yeah, I was in talks with them. So originally when the Black Gecko popped up on a Facebook group, it was nothing unlike anything I've seen before. And I messaged the guy, and right away he was very responsive. I was like, "Hey, I'm interested in this gecko. Where did you get it?" And I started asking him all these things.
Mhm.
He said a buddy of his sold it to him,
Yeah.
and that his buddy had, like 10 more or whatever the number was. So I asked him, um, could you get there was obviously already like a little bit of like controversy because people thought it was painted, and
Yeah.
people there's a lot of people that were speculating that it was, fake. So I was asking him, hey, so what like when did he started breeding? I just started asking him about the breeding project,
Yeah.
and he would tell me everything that he knew. Then I asked him, oh, would you mind sending me a video of it? And he sent me a
Mhm.
video of it. Then like people didn't like the video. They said it was, fake or whatever. So I'm like, hey, could you rub it with a
A paper
like a
towel.
na a paper towel to so I could show people? And then he did that. And then I told him, could you rub some water on it? And then he did that.
Yeah.
And but it got to I understand. Like, I was probably bugging the crap out of him, but it got to a point
Yeah.
that he was just like, I don't care what anybody thinks. It's my gecko, whatever.
Yeah.
But I will
Well, he
say,
probably
I
was having a whole bunch of people finding out
they
who
were
he was and
harassing him.
messaging him and harassing him, right?
Yeah,
Which makes it sorry, go ahead.
no, yeah, they were definitely harassing him and being nasty with him.
Yeah. So you're saying it got to the point, I guess he just didn't want to talk about
Yeah,
it anymore and
yeah. So I asked him. I remember I asked him for the original breeder's name. I messaged that breeder, and that guy was like rude right off the bat. He was just very angry. I guess because he had been seeing the backlash and stuff.
Mhm.
And I think, personally, I think the gecko was painted.
Okay.
Um, I think the guy that posted the original picture, he believes that is a real morph. I think he just got scammed. But
Okay.
the breeder was very like, um, I don't know, very like standoffish right off the bat.
Okay.
So it was a little odd to me. And the way the way the animal was moving in some of the videos, I was like, oh, I don't know, it could be it's a little awkward, but who
Yeah.
knows? Who knows? It's like if you had that morph and you had 10
Mhm.
of them or whatever, or like like a significant breeding project, like why wouldn't you be
You'd
selling them?
share
Why would
that.
or yeah,
Yeah.
why wouldn't you share that? You'd make so much money,
You know, the
whatever.
good that came out of it though is that you have now all these breeders who are working with really dark phantoms that are now
Yeah.
sharing their projects and showing what they're working with and like, look, this is really an
Yeah.
actual
And
gecko that's not painted or
and that like the series of posts that I made through those,
Mhm.
it reached so many people. I swear I had people that don't talk about that aren't in our world
Yeah.
asking me about this gecko. Like people
Yeah.
that like my friends that aren't even into reptiles. I had random people that are not into reptiles asking me about this gecko. And I'm
Yeah.
like, it just like captured the imagination of everybody, I guess. But it was interesting because it brought a lot of new people in.
Yeah, well, that sometimes some controversy can start, can
Yeah.
kind of draw other people in. And then this is going to segue for your shirt that I absolutely love, which is Guys Chill. It's just geckos, and I
Yeah.
still feel like I need a mug that says that. But I
Yeah, yeah,
refuse to
yeah.
release it and take your idea. So I will wait
Yeah,
till you release the
yeah,
mug.
you know what? I'll make it. I'll make it happen. I'll make it happen for sure.
So how many of these shirts have you sold? Like, did it get pretty popular? Like, I would imagine every time that there's some sort of bullshit that pops up and you're like wearing the shirt in a video, they're like, we got to get that.
Yeah, yeah, they were very popular, especially in the beginning. I saw a whole bunch. It's Yeah, people, I don't know, people get too like people feel like they're at if you disagree with them in a subject talking about geckos, they feel personally attacked. And it's like, no, we're just, we just disagree on something or the morph or whatever the hell it is. But
Yeah.
yeah.
But
Yeah,
it's
it's
like
a
that with
popular show.
everything. Because like
Yeah,
we're getting that right now with the Pixel talk, right? Like EchoPod did the video about Pixel
yeah,
a little over a week ago, and now that's the big controversy right now is discussions on Pixel, right? So I
yeah,
think people are always going to look for something to kind of pick apart or, disagree with.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's the nature of like humanity, I guess.
Yeah. Do you find like I try to stay out of all that myself. I mean, being new and stuff, I feel it could be easy to get dragged into some of those back and forth chats, right?
Yeah.
Um, but it is nice to hear like some people kind of voicing their opinions and have who have more experience and stuff on that. Um, let's talk about the gold standard gecko club. And I'm gonna switch because I have your little logo here and I think it's adorable. So you've already kind of talked about on other interviews and stuff how this came about. Maybe just give us a little Cole's notes on, you know, where this idea came from and what made you kind of want to start this. Maybe explain to people
Yeah,
who
so
don't know what it's all about, because I know there's a few people who might not even know about it, right?
right. So the Gold Standard Gecko Club is an organization that I started that is basically we're gonna be piggybacking off of major reptile shows, and we're gonna put on a competition that is basically to figure out who has the most complete gecko. So it's a confirmation competition. We're not just looking at the color and the pattern, we're looking at the overall structure of the animal, where the proportions of the limbs and the tail and the face and the overall body. Because so when I started this, it was originally what put the idea in my mind is I got a dog, and I was very into the functionality of my dog because I have an American bully, and certain
Okay.
breeds or certain breeders in the American bully world started breeding them with other breeds, and they started creating these exotic bullies, and they're not very functional. So I was like, I
Mhm,
don't like that because they lose what a dog should be, in my opinion.
mhm,
So I'm like, okay, I don't want this to happen with geckos. And with the new influx of breeders coming in from COVID and in this last couple of years and the new morphs, there's been a couple morphs like the super cappuccino, for example, that kind of like definitely, question the ethics of what we do. So I was
mhm,
like, I don't want our hobby or our species to go in that route. So I was like, how can we make this better? How can we like put a spotlight on the breeders that are doing things right? They're not breeding just for the cool morphs. They're actually breeding to have a nice proportionate animal that is nice and healthy. And I just started developing that. I started thinking about it. I started talking to a lot of experienced breeders, started bouncing ideas, started questioning my own thoughts and my own breeding projects and my own groups.
mhm.
And when I started seeing animals from the wild, I have an F3
Okay.
animal, and that animal is very big and robust. The just like a big blocky head, nice, snout. And I started looking at that animal. I'm like, some of the animals that I have that are 6, 7, 8 generations in don't look like this. The snout got a lot shorter, the eyes got a lot bigger.
Yeah.
They're, things start changing. The color and the pattern is incredible. It's amazing. It's evolved, but we have kind of like taken two steps back when it comes to the body um, proportions, right? So I was just
Mhm.
trying to figure out, okay, now we got to start piecing together what like the perfect gecko would look like, and
Yeah.
that's originally where that what the gold standard gecko club, why that was founded.
Well, it gets too easy to start morph chasing, right? And you see that
Yeah,
with other species, like with ball pythons, for instance. You have
yeah,
so many different morphs, and people are trying to make different combos and stuff, but you're very limited with a snake, right? As for conformation, I mean, you want to make sure that
yeah,
you're not having shark mouth, or like there's certain aspects that you can kind of look for and control.
yeah,
But with the geckos, you have more of an ability to be able to kind of, work towards a better overall structure of the animal and conformation. Like, I know for me, what really drew me into this, and I was super excited when you announced that you were doing this, because we're on a farm and I breed kuni pigs, and they're a
oh
New
nice,
Zealand mini pig. And when they came over to North America, it was a lot of breeders were starting to breed for size because they wanted to do meat production. So they wanted larger pigs to be able to do more meat and, like, higher value when they're processing. We here, we don't do meat, we just do breed standards. So we are breeding for traditional kuni, New Zealand standards, to kind of
right,
bring it back, because they end up losing some of the positive aspects that they had in their first place, which came with their original structure. So when I saw this, I'm like, this is great. I'm like, at first I was like, I really wish we had some sort of standard like they do for dogs, or, like for livestock, or when they do the shows where you can kind of really evaluate your animals and be able to select your top quality, not just for, genetics like morphs and so on, and colors and patterns and traits, but also the look and conformation. Um, when you were so what was the process? And I'll bring up the picture. So this is what you have right now posted, right? As to the different aspects that are being evaluated on the confirmation. So how did you come about to defining what was good structure versus not so good structure?
right. So the structure is not so much of a functionality thing. Um, it's more cosmetics. It's something that
Mhm.
we are kind of drawn to, but because if you look at crested geckos in the wild, they basically have no crest. Their head is a lot more narrow, and it's not anything that I would consider um, like necessary for their functionality and for them to live like a nice and happy and healthy life, right? So
Yeah.
that was more cosmetic. That was more like what I thought people liked the most. But as far as like the eyes go, the snout goes, we have seen going back to dogs, for example, like animals that have and bearded dragons as well, actually. But anyways, I'll stick with the dogs so it's easier to understand. When the snout starts getting too short, too close to the face, then the animal starts having more issues breathing,
Mhm.
and that could cause developmental issues, and that could eventually just reduce the life of the animal. So that's like very straightforward, right? The nostril size, we saw with the super cappuccinos that it does have an effect on the animal, and it causes all sorts of problems. uh there's other things like the full length of the body and the proportion of the limbs. The reason why that's important, I've been breeding for a long time, so I've seen this in my animals. I've seen this in other animals where the body starts to get a little bit shorter, the limbs start to get a little bit shorter. And while these animals right now are fine, I'm sure they'll live, the 20 years or whatever. The thing is that we want to look 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 steps ahead and say, okay, if we keep breeding these animals, what's going to happen in the future?
Yeah.
So I didn't want to like, you have to come up with like the standard that is as closely related to the animals in the wild, because those are the animals that have been here for, centuries. Who knows how long they've been out there. So
Yeah.
that's originally how I started coming up with the standard. And like I said earlier, I did go back and forth with some experienced breeders and say, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think should be, the proper snout length or the proper tail length? Because we'll see like some geckos that have a very short tail, and we could all agree, okay, maybe that's not, the best. But then there's gecko that have like a super long tail,
Hmm.
and we're like, okay, it's not necessarily that that super long tail is going to be detrimental to the gecko, but if we're gonna go by what most animals look like in the wild or in their natural habitat, we're gonna try to keep it at that on average of what that looks like.
Yeah. Is the plan so I've seen like the different individual pictures, like when the show was coming out and there was promotion for it at Flora Fauna, there were more
Yeah,
like specific pictures where it was like focusing on eyes and focusing on tail, and where it was
yeah,
showing like bad structure versus good. Do you have any
yeah.
plans on doing like more in-depth videos on explaining the different things, that criteria that you're looking at, and explaining more in depth why certain things are bad versus, good?
Yeah, yeah, we do. So we got through this first show, and obviously leading up to that show, I was, promoting it more because we wanted to get people to sign up to it, and we wanted to get people interested in it. As
Mhm,
right now, I don't have another show scheduled because obviously this is it's a business, so I'm trying to make it profitable, but at the same time, I'm I've seen a lot of like going back to the dog shows. I've seen a lot of how when a lot of when money starts getting involved, it starts like corrupting the organization.
yeah,
So I want to make it profitable, of course, because if I'm putting my time into it and I'm
yeah,
taking away from Tiki's Geckos, I need it to be profitable, but I need to keep it as like as pure as possible, and as I gotta try to get rid as much bias and influence from other people as possible. Um, but going back to the question, I think as new shows are scheduled, I'll start to put up more videos that are kind of like going into detail. I know we did a video that was like us grading our own geckos, and we go into detail
mhm,
there as well. Like, okay, why we give this gecko that score, why we give that gecko this score, and we kind of break down the geckos. We do like 4 or 5 different geckos.
mhm.
But as we get closer to a new show that we have, we'll do more videos like that for sure. And I'm very open to to you know to constructive criticism from experienced breeders. This past show that we did, this first one, was very eye-opening from like the logistics standpoint to like figure out how we were going to time everything and everything that we needed
Yeah,
to be running. But it was also good because now that everybody kind of like went through it, and they're even all the judges, like the judges were awesome, and they were all like, okay, now we were bouncing ideas out of each other at the end,
mhm.
and that's what's going to start to kind of like shape this thing, because it's very early still. So
Yeah,
as we start putting more shows together and people start seeing the animals more and start thinking about what we're saying and then saying, wait, I don't think this is this way. I think we could do it this way. That's where
mhm.
this thing is gonna start to mold better.
Yeah. And I would imagine it was probably really difficult too, because I mean, you had your own stuff going on at Flora Fauna, and like adding something new and uncharted territory, right? Like like to
Yeah.
do all the, like, even thinking about all logistics, like, live videos and when you're judging, and um I one thing I
Mhm.
think would be, which would be cool, and maybe this is something that could be implemented when you're doing future ones, is hearing judge commentary on geckos. And I know it's kind of like it can be a bit of a, you don't want people to feel sad or upset if you're saying something negative, but at the same time it could help with constructive, because I know, like, for instance, for the pig shows during COVID, you couldn't do in-person shows anymore. So they brought all of those online. So they're all
Yeah.
now video submissions, which was great for people in Canada to be able to participate, because you can't just it's easier to import your pig into the States to be able to participate, but then to bring it back into Canada, you have to have it at like an inspected facility and quarantine it for over 2 months. So it ends up being a huge process. So now you're kind of opening it up where more people can participate. But then when with those videos, you had the judge talking over the video and commenting on the structure and saying, what their observations were, and which ends up being really, valuable when you're working on future projects. I would
Yeah.
imagine it'd be a little bit tricky with the geckos and stuff.
Yeah.
Like people might be a little bit more sensitive to that, but
Yeah, that's something that I thought of. Ultimately, I didn't decide to do that because people get, even in this past show, I already saw, a little taste of it. People get, when you're criticizing their gecko, when you're like literally judging their
yeah,
gecko, um, people will get, a little offended because they think, oh, this is my best gecko, or this is like the gecko that I thought was gonna win this thing, and then it doesn't end up winning, or things don't go how they thought, and they get a little offended by that stuff. And I didn't want to create any friction between the judges and the contestants, because at the end of the day, we're all in the same community and we all buy
yeah,
geckos from each other, and I didn't want to come in between that. But
yeah.
what I think I'll do is I'll have the judges, and we'll keep it the same way it was, where they don't commentate. We don't the contestants at the end of the show. I gave them their scores, but their scorecards,
Okay,
but they didn't see what judge scored their gecko, or
got you.
because I didn't want to create beef between people. But
Yeah,
what I'll do is I'll kind of what I was thinking of is having a person that's also experienced that can do commentary,
okay,
but he's just like, he has nothing to do with the judges, kind of like in a
yeah,
fight, right? Like in a boxing match or an
yeah,
MMA fight, where you have the judges who judge the fight, and then you have the commentators who are kind of like talking about it as the fight is taking place. So
yeah.
something like that, like, but it's it's tricky because, again, then it's undoubtedly going to cause conflict, but it might just
At
have
the
to be something we do.
at the end of the day, I think that gets better with time, though, right? Like, because when you're looking at other different animals that have these type of shows, like the dog shows or cat shows, I mean, there's a whole accreditation process for judges to get certified. So then when you're participating at the shows, you know that the individuals that are judging, there's almost like a different level of respect, because you know that these people are certified. And I mean, there's still different judges will look at and prefer different things, and there's always going to be some sort of beef or controversy with it. But with this being new, I mean, it's not a feasible thing to kind of go into starting certifying people just yet. And like, it's more of a who has the most experience, who's
Yeah.
the veterans in the industry, who can really bring value to an opinion on judging the geckos based on the criteria that's set out.
Yeah, that was one of my criteria for the judges, was you got to have at least 10 years of experience working with the
Hmm.
species. So, I think because, in 10 years you could get a couple generations in, and you've seen enough animals where you can make more like educated decisions. But
Yeah.
before they started judging, we kind of went over everything, and everybody was on board. So,
Hmm.
it's but yeah, it's like you said, it's this is a new thing, so we're still trying to like piece everything together. I think the first show went pretty well.
Yeah.
Uh, but the thing about like about the judges being certified or whatever, or and people having respect towards that, I don't think our community's like that. I think our
No.
community's different. I think people don't care. Like it's gonna nobody's gonna. I could accredit someone, whatever. I could give them a title or whatever I want, but at the end of the day, they're still gonna talk crap about them on the internet, and it's gonna get nasty. So
Yeah.
that's why I don't plan on showing the contestants who judged their geckos and whatnot. I
Yeah,
gave them their scores and their scorecards so they saw what they could probably improve in because every gecko
yeah,
got judged by three different judges. So if like the three judges said you had a a number three on the crest structure, for example, then you know, okay, maybe it's not this one person. It's like maybe I
yeah,
got to change something with my geckos.
yeah. With your experience, like in breeding, so like with this, I know, and I've talked to a few other people who've done similar stuff. When the standards kind of came out, it gave us a good baseline to kind of reevaluate our own collections, right? Because I
Mhm.
know, I don't know how it is in the States, but in Canada, you tend to have a lot of similar lineages floating around, but then you have other individuals that are maybe selling a dream where they're like, oh, this is like high end, nice stuff. And then you find out it might not be, so you tend to rack up a lot of different variety of geckos in your collection. And this kind of gave us an opportunity to really look objectively at all the animals that we have in our projects and kind of refocus and say, well, I'm going to keep these and maybe these will sell as pets or so on. With that in mind, you can pair two of the nicest structured animals and not necessarily get nice offspring as well, right? Like it is variable. So with your experience, is there specific traits that you find that are easier um where, let's say you have an animal that has not as nice of a head structure, so I'm like, oh well, I really like other things about this animal, so I want to keep that into my breeding projects, but I'm going to pair it to something that may complement. Like, are there certain traits within the gecko structure that you find are easier to kind of work with and improve upon versus other ones where you're like, if you see, oh, a tail like this, then it's not even worth kind of including into the breeding project? Do you know what I mean? Like, is there specific things?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it depends on the geckos as well, and you kind of figure that out as you breed them. Because,
Mm,
for example, I have a particular male that I'm thinking of right now that he has very good head structure, very, very nice crest, like it's all filled in very evenly. And basically all of his offspring get those crests.
okay.
So he has great crest and he passes it down very easily. I have other geckos that have great crest and the babies don't necessarily inherit that as well. So that gives you a little bit more room to play with. For example, like if I have a female that has really nice color pattern and structure, like body structure, but the crests aren't as, top tier as I would like, and I pair it to that male, I know that I'm gonna kind of get a little bit of both in the offspring. And because that first male passes down those crests very well. So I you got to know your animals and you got to know, okay, if I have this adult animal that maxed out at 45 grams, maybe you want bigger geckos, you want a heftier gecko, and
Mhm.
maybe you don't breed it to that other animal that maxed out at 45 grams. Maybe you breed it to the animal that maxed out at 60 grams, right?
Yeah.
And you start to like play with that. It's just no gecko is perfect. So you
Mhm.
kind of have to like balance. You gotta see what each gecko is missing, and then try to complement that with the gecko you're breeding into.
Yeah, so not overly being picky, like, when you're looking at and looking for a perfect gecko and pairing perfect, because
Yeah,
like you said, you can kind of, complement each other. Like, another example I can think of is, something I never really even thought about was the eyes, right? And I know I have one male who has more of a bulgy eye. And it's like, well, if I pair him to an animal that doesn't have the bulgy eye, like, what's the percentage of hatchlings that I'm going to get that are going to have eyes that look like the dad? Or, like, are there certain things that are, more like, oh, they're all going to have bulgy eyes, so I'm not even going to bother pairing him, like, so kind of, I
yeah,
guess you have to breed it and see
you
whether or
have to
not it's
write.
going to pass it out, because he might not pass any of it, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. And I think it also depends on how ingrained that particular trait is in the genetics of the animal. Because
Hmm.
I'll give you an example with like color, in like my gargoyle geckos. Like certain animals have been bred generation after generation to be a particular color, and then you could breed that animal to like an animal that has no red whatsoever, and the babies will all have red because it's been
Okay.
ingrained so deep into the generations. We stacked it on top of each other, and then when you breed it to an animal that doesn't have any red whatsoever, all the babies will have red, right?
Yeah.
So it's the same thing with like other it's the same thing with other traits that these geckos have, whether it's the tail length or the snout length. If you have like generation after generation after generation of geckos with bulging eyes being bred back to each other, and then you breed it to a normal gecko, then that
Hmm.
bulging eye trait might like suppress the other trait. So
Yeah.
it's about experimenting and you know testing it out on your own. I definitely wouldn't say, "Oh, your gecko has bulging eyes. Like, sell it as a pet only. Never like breed that gecko again." But
I guess
I
that's
think
when
a good way,
lineage comes in handy, right? Like when you see the lineage, you can kind of see where it comes from, and
yeah, sometimes because it's hard online. Uh, Unless you see the animals in person, you could take a
Mhm.
photograph a certain way and hide the defect.
Yeah.
So lineage is important for sure, but it's I like to go by what I see in person. So you could see animals. Eventually, you'll start to see an animal and know that okay, the parents could have only looked a certain way.
Hmm.
Um, but it's important to just test it out, breed it. And I think a good way to do it is if you look at the scoring system that we have, where it's like 100 points, it's basically we give 10 points per category. Like, the crests could get anywhere from 0 to 10 points, the color 0 to 10 points, so on and so on. You could
Yeah.
create a system for yourself where you're like, you grade each individual gecko that you have, and if they don't, you know, get over 70 points, then maybe you're like, okay, this is not good enough for my breeding stock, right? So
Yeah.
you can literally look at our video and see our judging card and say, okay, I'm gonna take these things, I'm gonna grade my own geckos, and then if my geckos don't get past 70 points, that one's not gonna be a breeder. If it gets over 70 points, then we could keep that one and breed it. You could do something like
Yeah.
that or whatever.
Gecko Co says, if you don't think Tampax is perfect, I'll take her. I think everyone wants her.
Yeah.
And
Tampax is a
Cassandra's,
male.
uh,
Tampax is a male, so
there you go. Take
even
down. You
better.
see, get it right, Gecko Co. Cassandra says, as a newbie, I'll definitely be using these ideas as I continue on. Yeah, I mean, it's really good. It's a good baseline, right, to have.
Yeah.
And then what question? Oh, I lost you for a second. You're back. Okay. Um, Gecko Co wants to know, do you see F1 and wild caught genetics being important in helping with structural issues?
Body structure, yes. Head structure for crested geckos, it'll set you back. But
Right.
sometimes you have to take a small step back to gain on everything else, right?
Yeah.
So with crested geckos, yes. I personally don't have any F1 or F2 gargoyle geckos that I know of. I have some older gargoyle geckos, but I don't think they're like F1 or F2. Um, but yeah, it's it's hard to find, like, especially nowadays, a lot of those animals are either super old and not breeding anymore, or
Mhm.
we've gone so far along in terms of how the geckos look that nobody really wants to breed that back into their stock. I
Yeah.
purposely have this line of F3 and F4 crested geckos that are not, they're not to today's standards of color and pattern for sure, but you look at the gecko and it's hefty, it has a, like I was telling you earlier, has a big blocky head. So I'll be
Mhm.
like breeding some of that to really nice stuff on the side to kind of like start getting it up to par to eventually put it back into my main breeding projects. But I think it's important. I'll post F3 geckos for sale, and people don't really care. They don't really, that's not something people are looking at so much right now for
Yeah.
whatever reason.
Well, maybe it comes into like it'll come more into play now that we're having more of the genetics popping up. Because one thing that I find, like with ball pythons, you can have a dinker gene, like a brand new gene that pops up in a collection, and you can breed it to a normal and work it and like
Hmm.
seclude it from everything else, right? Whereas with a gecko, if you're having new stuff popping in, you're like, okay, well, what do you breed it to kind of see how it works and
Yeah. So one thing I will say about the new morphs that's good is that so at the top, the very like super high end geckos that you see, like on the internet, most of them are very closely related already because when you
Mhm.
trace them all back, they all have some similar great grandparents or whatever the case is, right? So like for example, like Lalo Rap or Captain for those people that are, old school, they'll know those names. If you trace back your gecko long enough through the lineage, you'll see those geckos. And it's funny because you start to look at all your geckos and you think, oh, they're unrelated, but you go back 4 generations and they all have the same grandparents. So
Yeah.
one thing that's good about these new genes coming in is that people will breed like a cappuccino that, you know, 8 years ago, that was like like a pet store ugly gecko.
A
People
brown
started,
gecko.
yeah, people started breeding those geckos into the higher end selectively bred geckos that we've had for so long, and it's a
Yeah.
completely different bloodline. And now we have a little bit more to work with
Yeah.
genetically. People see the sables or the lily whites even when they first came out, and it's like completely unrelated to the lines that were already in the US that people were refining, and
Yeah.
that does bring some genetic diversity into it. So that's one thing that's good about the new morph sometimes is that people, experienced breeders that usually kind of can get a little snobby with the geckos that they breed, that might be a little bit more closely related. They start injecting this new blood from these new morphs into it, and it diversifies their blood.
Yeah, it expands it. We
Yeah,
got a hot topic here.
let's go.
Aquatic Moose says, is it actually possible to create a super lily white with the right incubation temps? Do you think the new leucistic gene will be crossed with lily and then back crossed?
So I don't think it's possible.
Mhm.
A lot of people have tried and come out with it, and trust me, a lot of people have tried and kept it under wraps, but nobody has ever been able to produce a super lily white that was viable. I don't think
Mhm.
it's a incubation issue. It's a genetic issue. What happens is that when the color, I forgot where I read this, but melanin is when in the developmental stage of living things, melanin takes a really big role um, in the organs when they're getting produced. So I think that may be an issue. Like when the animal has absolutely no melanin, maybe it's lacking
Mhm.
something else in certain vital organs, and that's why they're not making it. But the super lily white for sure, I think is a no
Mhm.
go. But with the super hypo or the leucistic geckos that we see now that are different, I think that I've had them in my hands, and I've had big juveniles in my hands, and I've seen 30 plus gram adults, and they look healthy. Now,
Good.
will they stay healthy over time? I don't know. They definitely look. When I saw the super cappuccinos at that size, I knew right off the bat they weren't healthy. And
Yeah.
even at that time when they first came out, that people weren't saying anything yet, I know, I just looking at the animal, I knew they weren't healthy because I've seen animals like that before that would just crash. Uh, but with these super hypos, I have some hope. Now, will we people have already bred them to the lily whites and produced hypo lily whites, but I don't think anybody's produced a super hypo lily
Okay.
white yet. And will they cross it to make a super lily white, super hypo or whatever? I don't think people would do that because at the end of the day, the super hypo and the super lily white look identical, except one is
Yeah.
lethal and is no good, and one is viable so far. So what would be the point in risking it and trying to produce this double super that might end up
Yeah.
just looking like the same thing, you know?
Well, and
I don't
that will probably not be viable, because I would imagine if there was a super lily that we'd know about it by now. Like you're
Yeah,
saying, I'm
exactly.
sure that there's been people that tried it under wraps, right? Without anyone kind of knowing to see, hey, like, can I get this to work?
Yeah.
I have a lily white question for you, because I've heard this going around and I've never personally experienced issues with it, but I have heard that for lily whites that you have to be careful with temps and incubation temps not being too high, because there can be neurological issues.
Yes.
So what's been your
Yes.
experience with that?
Yeah, this is true. When I imported, I think I was actually the first person to import lily whites into the United States. I'm pretty sure on that. If I wasn't the first person, it was Mark Orphis or Alan Rapace that
Okay.
into North America. Um, but when I got my first uh, couple lily whites and I was breeding them, I was incubating them a little warmer, and I was having a lot of dead babies in the eggs, and
Okay.
they just kept popping up dead, 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 and I kept like the egg would fail at a very late stage, and I would open it up and it'd be a lily white in it.
Mhm.
So I was like, "What the hell is going on?" Um, and honestly, I wasn't even incubating them that warm. It was probably just like 77 or 76 degrees because I've always kind of just incubated at room temperature. Now,
Mhm.
I have noticed that um, some in the beginning when they were starting to hatch out, it's a very, very low number. I mean, I produce hundreds of lily whites like in a year, and maybe like one or two I'll see that kind of like have a slight head tilt. I haven't even seen it this year, or I can't even recall it seeing it last year. But I
Mhm.
remember in the first couple years, I did see it where the babies, and ultimately they always have it, where they have a slight head tilt that they're just kind of like standing and their head is like this. And
Yeah.
it could vary. So some will be just that where the gecko's kind of like that and it could function normal, but obviously you don't want to do anything with that. But then there's some that will kind of like spin in a circle, or like when they jump they kind of like jump off to the side like that instead of jumping
Okay.
straight. And I
It's
remember
very
Nick.
apparent when you're having issues, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's you'll see it right away. And it's from sometimes it develops. So sometimes there'll be a slight head tilt at birth, and then as the gecko gets older, it could get slightly worse. But
Okay.
I remember Nick Lum. Nick Lum was the founder of the Lily Whites, and when he was running experiments, he had the Lily Whites for a lot of years before he released them. He was running experiments. He noticed that as well, that a very small percentage of them would hatch out with that neurological issue. He would breed those geckos, and he
Mm.
never had any issues with the babies. So it seemed to be that's when he came with a conclusion that it was an
Okay.
incubation issue, because he would see that would only happen when the animal was incubated at a higher temperature, and it's probably just because you're kind of like speeding up the process when you're incubating a little bit
Yeah.
warmer. But yes, I have seen it. I have noticed it. If you incubate at like I would say 75 and below, you won't have that issue really.
That was going
May
to be my
still.
question for the newbies, was, what is a safe temp that you're looking at to keep it below? So for Canadians, it's 23.8. So anything below 24 degrees Celsius would be, like, last year I incubated at 24, so which would be around that 75. I dropped it a degree this year. I didn't have any issues with my lilies last year, but then I heard that and I was like, well, maybe I'll drop it a degree, and
No, but yeah, I mean,
play it safe.
if you're not having any issues, it's really like if you get above 77 degrees, I would say.
Okay.
So it's nothing to like, freak out about. It could definitely happen. But like I said, I produce like hundreds of lily whites a year, and I don't see it. I can't remember the last time I seen it, honestly.
Okay. So it's not, and it could, I guess it could also maybe be even, um, lineage, right? That could be attributed to?
I
No?
don't think so. It's not, I don't think it's lineage. I have so the I have two adult geckos that have the head tilt,
Mhm.
that are like that hatched out with that, and I kept them. And I haven't noticed anything with them. I bred the female, one of them is a female, and that's the one I bred to my hybrid animal. And all
Okay.
the lily white offspring from those animals are fine. They're completely
Okay.
normal. Um, I mean, I don't think it is. And like going back to what Nick said it wasn't a genetic thing. It doesn't get passed down like that. It's an incubation thing. And
Incubation.
there's plenty of other issues that can get passed down through the incubation.
Yeah. Um, on the subject of projects, so you did send me some pictures. I asked you to send me some of your top, like your favorites. So let's
Yeah.
talk about. So let's start with the Cresties. So who are these guys, and tell me about them.
So those two boys are uh, two animals that will be breeding next year. And
Okay.
that's one from my white wall project, and then the other one in the back is from a tangerine project I have. And he's also white wall in the back, but with a tangerine. So there's what I like about the tangerine is that it gives it there's the orange markings that you see on like some geckos, but with time, those orange markings start to kind of like turn yellow and eventually they fade away. And I find that those orange markings don't last very long. Like when you see like a Halloween gecko, right?
Yeah.
People get confused and they see baby gecko pictures and they say, "Oh, my gecko's a Halloween," but it's not. I wouldn't consider that a Halloween if it doesn't keep that color until an adult, right?
Hmm.
Because these geckos, the yellow pattern, the orange pattern hatches out very, saturated, but as they get older, they start to lose it and it turns yellow and it turns yellow. And then in the next, like in by the time it's 3 years old, 4 years old, the gecko's like the yellow's very washed up. And with the tangerine, it helps them keep that orange pattern throughout their life. The father to that gecko there in the back is
Yeah.
a tangerine animal. Actually, comes from northern gecko. Funny enough, up there
Okay.
in Canada, and he still has that really deep, rich orange color that doesn't really fade. So that's why I like to work with the tangerine because it keeps that orange color really nice. And I just love like the look of the white walls with anything I put it. With the front gecko there, that's an offspring of Prodigy, an animal that I had. That's like that produces really really nice white walls, and I just
Mhm.
love like the nice thick white walling, the like the patterning, the harlequin markings that get kind of like in between the pinstriping and the white walling that you see there, like those markings. I just
Yeah.
like that really busy look sometimes. Yeah,
Now I got a tangerine question for you.
yeah.
So I I've seen a lot of geckos where their white pattern is pink. And I have
Mhm.
one here that I have in my collection. And there hasn't been that much talk about the pink color. From all I can find is that there was mention that it's
Is it a
tangerine,
is it a
but
lily white?
no, it's not a lily white. It's a soft scale. But from what I understand is it's how tangerine is expressed on like a crisp white pattern goes pink instead of orange. Whereas on like a yellow or orange pattern it would be more of an orange. So that have you heard or seen or worked with any of the pink stuff? Or I do have a lily white that does have peach tones to it, and I know that it is tangerine and it's more peach than orange and it's
Yeah.
maintained that color into it's almost basically adulthood right now. But the other one is a breeder here in Canada that acquired it's almost a greenish colored base and then a white wall pinstripe, but it's very, very pink. Like
You don't have a
very pink.
picture of it
I
that you
don't
could
have
pop
it to
up?
post here. I'll share it with you after. Like I have it on my Instagram. My hatchling is pink.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's like rosy. It's very pink.
Yeah, so we still haven't figured out the tangerine, you know, like super well, like we have some of the other morphs, but I have seen it expressed differently in different morphs. I've seen it expressed whether it's there's different um like hues to the tangerine or to whatever's influencing the marking color. We don't know there because I've seen some that are very, very yellow. I've seen some that are more orange, and I've seen some that are like that pink color. So I think it's all the same thing. I think it's tangerine, and depending on what you pair it with, it will express differently. But I have seen what you're talking about, where it's like a pink color, and I
Right.
tend to see that a lot in the lily whites, because the lily whites, for whatever reason, will like exaggerate a lot of the traits that we have in the in the hobby, right? So like if you put a lily white with like an extreme harlequin, it exaggerates the markings. If you put it with a really thick pinstripes, it makes all the pinstripe scales like super big and thick. Same thing with the color, like red lily whites are some of the most beautiful red colored animals ever because it just like makes everything pop. So I think a way to kind of like test that out would be to breed it to a lily white, but I do think it's the tangerine
Well, we'll
that it
keep
makes that
talking, and
pink
I
color.
I'll also I'm grabbed some snapshots of the picture, so I'm gonna see if I can get it up so I can show you what they look like.
Yeah.
Um, but we'll move to the next one in the meantime. So these ones, you want to talk about what you're working with these in projects?
Yeah, so the top guy is a super stripe, and super stripe and empty backs, very closely related. I would say it's I think the consensus has been that it's a lilac so far because it seems to be only the super stripe only seem to be showing up when you have empty back animals.
Yeah.
But so I'm really into them. I really like them. I It's like who could produce the most perfect super stripe, right? With the straightest laterals on the side and the straightest dorsal stripe. So that's always fun. I like doing that. And the bottom guy is an animal from my a tangerine group I have. He also has some whiteout on him, but I suspect I'm pretty sure he's a het empty back. Um, and again, the tangerine does weird things to the color of the gecko. That particular gecko, when it's fired down, it has like a greenish looking base color.
Okay.
So I'm always trying to like breed different things, not so much. A lot of people focus on like the same thing, like tricolor or like the brightest white or super Dalmatian, but I'm always like trying to like have different groups going on.
Gotcha. Well, and you're making it, you're adding variety, right? Like you're if you're doing something different and new, it it gives something new back to be able to have other people working into their projects and not always focus on the same stuff.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
Here I have.
But that's it. But
Oh,
if you
sorry.
go back to the last picture, sorry,
Yep.
that's a good that's good so you could see the difference between the tangerine on the bottom and that like orange pattern that starts to turn yellow on the top. And eventually in like 5 years, the gecko on the top, that yellow starts to fade very much. So
Okay.
it's I mean, if you've seen like a really old gecko, you know what I'm talking about, where it's like it doesn't look as crisp as it does there,
Yeah.
because that gecko's not that old there. But the tangerine holds the color a lot better, so
Okay.
it's harder to see the difference here as much. But when you see them in person, you could tell.
Okay.
But
Here I
yeah,
have the picture of the pinks for you. So the top
yeah,
one was the original male that
yeah,
he acquired into
yeah.
the
That's
project. The
yeah.
bottom is one of his hatchlings that he had produced. And
Hmm.
then this is the one that I have.
Yeah,
So you
yeah. I
see it's
see.
definitely pink.
Yeah, yeah. As you breed that more, you'll see it, especially if you breed it to the lily whites, you'll see it get exaggerated.
Okay.
But I don't know if it's tangerine, it might be another thing. But I
Okay.
remember like AC had a line, I think it was of tangerines, but he would call it the bubblegum line. which would
Yeah, I've
have
seen
that
that.
that pinkish hue.
This Gecko Cove saying here. I've seen some crazy olives and bright green crested geckos lately. Have you worked with them? And do you have any insight on thinking? Yeah. So he's seen my picture too. So I have a Hulk project. So I have a gecko that fires up completely black and then it will
Yeah,
fire down gray. And then when it's in mid fire, it has a
it's
green
green.
stage where it's like
Yeah.
a basically almost like a clover color. It's so bright.
Yeah, that tangerine gecko that you showed that was on the bottom like 2 pictures ago, that one's same thing. That bottom guy, he
Yeah, this
fires
one here.
down. Yeah, that one.
Okay.
That bottom one fires like down kind of green. Um, so I haven't, it's funny because when I first got into crested geckos, there was this big um like people wanted to make green geckos, the green crested geckos, and there's Pangea had a big green project, and
Okay.
for whatever reason, it's something that's very hard to kind of like pinpoint and pass down, and then everybody
Mhm.
forgot about it, and they just started making black geckos or lavender geckos. They didn't care so much about the green, and now it's kind of like starting to come back a bit. But we see it a lot in like the older, like the wild type generations or the wild type geckos where they show that olive green color. I had another gecko that was like a phantom that was an older gecko that I think came from Rapashi, and when he fired, like you're saying, in that in between stage, it was like green.
Yeah.
So it's hard to find those geckos, and it's even harder to reproduce them.
Well, I'm thinking even now with all the new additional, I'm hoping anyways, with some of the new stuff that everyone's working with with the soft scale stuff and I don't know if you're calling it soft scale or scatter scale. So I know that was a, a sensitive subject for some people, but with some of the new stuff that's really more that people have really worked on, I'm wondering if that'll make it a bit easier to be able to sustain some of that color and reproduce it. But I guess
Yeah,
time will tell with that one. Let's
yeah,
pop into your next one here. So tell us about these ones.
yeah. So those are my line of super stripes. They're white wall super stripes. I try to really make a clean look, so like very distinctive base color to marking color on the side, and trying to make the dorsal stripe in the middle go be as straight as possible. And same with the markings, the white wall markings on the sides. Obviously, you know, every generation I'm trying to make that a lot darker and a lot like better contrast.
Yeah.
But that's a line I like a lot because I just like that clean look. It's just like not a speck on the base color, just the markings on the laterals and on the dorsal. I like that line a lot. And by the way, that's one of the lines like that I started to notice like when I was first doing the gold standard gecko club. I'm like, okay, I need to start taking the snout started getting a little shorter. So I'm like,
Okay.
okay, now I gotta start like um focusing on everything else and not just the patterns and colors. It's you can
Okay.
I mean it's not like anything like um too extreme or anything, but I'm like definitely could see it compared to like my wild type geckos, my
Yeah.
F3 or F2.
We have a ball python person asking gecko question.
Let's go.
There's a ball python guy I hear fired up and fired down from gecko people. What are people judging the gecko on as quality when it's fired up or down? Well, I know for your show, you're judging them as fired up, right? When you're judging it in the
Yeah.
competition.
Yeah, because that's when the gecko's fired up is when it's showing its best color. It's when it's excuse me. So when the gecko's fired up is when you're gonna see the brightest red if the gecko's like a red
Mhm.
base, or even the marking colors, you're gonna see like the nicest oranges. But I guess it just depends on the gecko because like you're saying, you have that one gecko that the in-between stage is that green color, and you might think that's the coolest, expression of that gecko. So it just
Hmm.
depends on the person what they like most. But typically, when you take a picture of a gecko that you're gonna post for sale, or like us, when we're judging the geckos, we're gonna do it. We're gonna try to do it when the gecko's at its best and when it's super fired up.
Yeah, and in some instances with some projects, just to answer for demonic reptiles, you'll want to have a picture if you're investing a lot of money, like in a hypo project, of the animal fired up and down. Because I've heard that there's been instances where people will buy animals thinking they're hypo, but they're just getting fired down pictures of this animal, right?
Yeah, yeah, that happens. I'm sure.
Hopefully not that often, but a good little tip for some people, because I know up here in Canada that was a little bit of a drama situation where there were geckos being sold as hypo and they were just
Yeah,
fired down looking pink.
yeah, yeah.
So
That's
this
okay.
picture you
That's a
sent me, and
hypo.
I was like in love of this. I love this gecko.
So that's a hypo. Not so we got to make the distinction between the genetic hypo that that's an incomplete dominant that if you breed together you make those super hypos, the leucistic crested gecko. That's one thing. And then before that was a thing, we used to call geckos like this hypo, where it's more like a selectively bred thing. Some people speculate that it is also like a sort of incomplete, not incomplete dominant, but that it gets passed down like a dominant trait, where it would be like about to half of the offspring. But that's a hypo animal that also has tangerine
Okay.
and happens to be a soft scale as well, or scatter scale, whatever you want to call it. Um, but I do think that the soft or scatter scale does something in its super form that it alters the color in some way, which is really interesting because that's like a very unique animal in my collection. It almost looks blue when it's fired down, and when it's fired up, it's like like a dark gray, like a purplish gray, and then the tangerine markings, of course. I love
So
that
would it
gecko.
be
It's really
like
unique.
kind of like the cold fusion stuff, I guess, that Pangea has? Like cold fusion would be line, right? There's
Yeah, yes,
confusion when people hear terms like charcoals and cold fusions. Like those are all
exactly.
kind of names that are given when people are working with specific line of
Yeah, so
animals,
the
right?
yeah, the Cold Fusion is a line that was developed by Tom, um, Tom from Gecko Logical. It's not Pangea's
Okay.
line, but Pangea
Okay.
and Tom are very close friends, so Pangea sells those geckos with him as
Gotcha.
well. But they were developed by Tom, and yeah, it would be same morph combination as the Cold Fusion, I would say.
Okay. Awesome. And so what would you say are your main like top projects that you're working with Crested Geckos? Like what are the things that you're most excited with? I guess the tangerine stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I have pretty much everything you could think of. I have extreme Harlequin projects, I have tricolor projects, I have cappuccino projects, super Dalmatian, everything. The stuff
Mhm.
that, you I like all of them. So it just kind of goes by like every 1 year I'll be more excited about the tangerines. The next year I'll be more excited about the super stripes. The following year I'll be more excited about the super
Yeah.
dalmatians. So it just kind of like changes. Right now, I would say I'm really excited about the sable, the
Mhm.
sables and the super cappuccino, the super the super stripes that I'm going to be breeding this following season. Those two girls that you had showed when those are going to be breeding this following year. So I'm really excited about the super stripes.
Okay.
Just because it's like, okay, that opportunity to make the next generation even more perfect. Uh,
Mhm.
but yeah, it's also lily whites. Lily white's my favorite morph. So like
Mhm.
I think the lily whites are the best thing to happen to crested geckos as far as like popularity, and it really like injected this enthusiasm into like breeding crested geckos that nothing else has. So that's for sure my favorite morph right now that I'm always like trying to, make better.
We got a question: is lavender hypo and cold fusion the same? So cold fusion, like we said, was like it's a line of hypo, but
Yeah.
not
And
genetic hypo. It's like
exactly.
a stacked hypo, and lavender would be hypo basically. It's
Yeah, yeah. Lavender. The thing is, the lavender gets thrown around a lot, and it's so hard to like pinpoint because it's very subjective. But typically, a lavender would be a an animal that fires down to like that purplish gray color, and then fires. They all fire up kind of like a uh,
Hmm.
dark gray. Hmm.
And we got one more question before we go to the next pictures. Thoughts on lilies with Dal spots?
Yes, yeah. So lily whites suppress Dalmatian spots for whatever reason. I think because the lilies are acting as a sort of like like maybe like a sort of like a hypogene or something where it's trying to get rid of the dark, but I think that's why. But the lily whites suppress Dalmatian spots, but occasionally you'll have lily whites that will have a couple specks. I don't mind them. I don't. Every a lot of people in the community seems to have this thing about like spotless geckos, like they want
Yeah.
everything spotless. I don't care. I like. I used to have this line of I mean, I still do, but I used to have these geckos that I was breeding specifically for it was lavender white patterned geckos, quad stripes and pinstripes that had a bunch of spots, and I call them cookies and cream.
Okay.
And I liked it, but a lot of people, they kind of like just want if it's a
Snub their
Dalmatian, it
nose
has to
at
be like
spots.
yeah, if it's Dalmatian, it has to be like only super Dalmatians and like no color or no pattern, just Dalmatian spots. And if
I
it's
always joke. I
patterned, then it
blame
has no.
Robbie for that.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, no, I have a yellow lily white here that has black and red spots, and it's all over, and it's on her white too. And I think it's really cool. Like it's really neat
yeah,
look. But yeah, some people are picky about their spots. So we've definitely hit over the hour mark. I usually try to keep these about an hour, but I know we have some other pictures, and I kind of wanted to show them off because you do some
uh,
really awesome stuff with gargoyle geckos.
yeah,
Um, so maybe just tell us, like, I'm sure some people will already know some of these geckos, but I just kind of wanted to show them off for
yeah.
you. So who's this one here?
So that is Tampax,
It's
and
Tampax.
yeah, that's probably my favorite gecko I've ever produced, honestly.
Yeah.
And that's a third generation Deadpool line animal.
Wow.
Um, Yeah, so he's, really obviously what the thing about the Deadpool line is aside from the red coloration, I just wanted to make animals that will have red color that lasts throughout their lifestyle, their whole life cycle, and
Yeah.
also putting as much color on the animal as possible. But when they're fired down like it is there, the cool thing about gargoyle geckos is that gecko's fired down right now or in that picture, and it's absolutely stunning. When it's fired up, it looks like it's almost all red.
Oh,
So
cool.
whether it's fired up or fired down, you're going to see red. With a crested gecko, normally when we're talking about a red crested gecko, it's the base color, and if the gecko's fired down, it's going to be like a salmon pink or like a light, color, and you're not going to see any red. But gargles, you
Yeah.
see red all the time. That's why I love them so much. But yeah,
And
that's
the Deadpool line has been producing for you very consistent red too with the offspring, right?
yeah, yeah. So it's of course it also depends on what you breed it to. Like if you breed it to like a really crappy red or an animal that has no color whatsoever, the quality of the red is not going to be up to par. But but yeah, it's by far I would say Deadpool's like the most important, like not to be, that guy, but I think he's the most important gecko in terms of like gargoyle geckos and what it's done for the species and the morph. Because
Hmm.
if you look at the craziest gargoyle geckos that you'll find, if you trace them, you'll see it's Deadpool lineage.
Okay.
And yeah, he's an awesome animal. And he wasn't even produced by me. He was produced by Phil Tremper, which is like
Okay.
an absolute OG. Like he's been breeding for longer than I've been alive. So The
Well,
credit goes to him for developing this originally.
credit where credit's due, eh?
Yeah.
Gecko says, do you see that mixing high end blotches and stripes together makes some of the highest coverage animals?
Yeah, well, I like that combo because it makes the red kind of scattered. And when you start breeding striped back to stripe, you'll get these perfect red stripes and like in between it'll be kind of like that perfect white and perfect stripes.
Yeah.
But when you breed it to a super blotch, then you start to get like the speckling of red in the belly and like in everywhere. So
Okay.
I think that's like the key to making some of the most stunning animals, personally.
Awesome.
Like that gecko, actually. So that gecko, it was a product uh of Deadpool Jr., which is a striped animal to a
Okay.
super blotched, and you can't tell now because it's fully fired up. So that's what I was talking about. You can't see much contrast, but when it's fired down, you can see how it's blotches of like red blobs everywhere, and it looks like somebody like scattered blood on it, basically.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And then yeah, you see here the striping in
Yeah.
between, eh?
Yeah, so that top animal is like one of our red stripes fired down, and then the bottom animal is what I think either a melanistic or a hypo gargoyle gecko. That's one of my big projects that I'm trying to prove out, and I will hopefully
Okay.
prove it out this year. Where I think it's like fired up, that animal doesn't look much different than it is there. So you'll get a lot
Really?
of gargoyle geckos that, yeah, you'll get a lot of gargoyle geckos that when they fire down, they look white completely, but then they fire up and they have like these really dark gray or even black stripes running across their whole body, their face, and everything. These geckos don't, and I have two of them. They're brothers, and this year I paired the brothers to so like the offspring from Vanilla Ice, which is that guy there. I paired his offspring females to his brother, which is White Boy, and then White Boy's offspring I paired to Vanilla Ice. So
Okay.
we haven't hatched any visuals yet, but we've only hatched only a couple babies from those groups so far. So
Okay.
hopefully in the next couple months I could prove this thing out. It'll be really big for gargoyle geckos if
That's
that
super
happens to be.
exciting. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
this is
that's
him again,
another.
eh?
Yeah,
Another one?
yeah, that's him. That's him again. That's Vanilla
Okay.
Ice. Yeah,
Oh, awesome. That's super exciting.
yeah, that's another picture of Tampax.
Okay.
Yeah.
I I don't know much about gargoyles. I've completely stuck with Cresties. We have a couple that gargoyles we picked up more as
Hmm.
pets. I know my husband was looking to get a gecko for his room, and then we kind of were like, well, let's look at the gargoyles, and they're definitely neat. I don't know much about their genetics, like their colors and stuff, but they're
Yeah.
very cool. Like the different options that you have out there. I guess there's not, I guess, as many as what we have for Crested, but
Yeah, gargoyle geckos are like I would say like 8 years back than
mhm,
what crested geckos are right now. Because with crested geckos now, we could see like, okay, you know, empty back is incomplete dominant. We could tell you all these things about the different traits, and we kind of have pinpointed them, and we've ran enough experiments where we know. But with the
mhm,
gargoyle geckos, we haven't. So it's still very early in
mhm,
their like in terms of morphs and understanding how the genetics get passed down. But like the super red gargoyle geckos speak for themselves. It's a
yeah,
selectively bred thing that we keep stacking on top of each other, kind of like the white on crested geckos is.
mhm.
Uh, where back then before Lily Whites, everybody was just trying to stack the white on top of each other and make the
Yeah,
whitest geckos
snowflaking
possible.
and yeah,
Snow, exactly, white spot, snowflake, yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
And so before we close off, like you have quite a variety of different other reptiles too that you're breeding, right? So we'll pop
Yeah,
some up here. So you work with skinks.
yeah, yeah. We do a lot of different reptiles. Blue tongue skinks, jeweled lacerdas, panther chameleons. I mean,
Okay.
day geckos. We sell pretty much everything. We're an online store, so we sell all sorts of animals that we like to work with. and we breed the iguanas too because we're in Florida, so we could keep a lot of these things outside. And
What kind of iguana is this again? This is a
so that's a Lewisite hybrid.
okay.
It's a type of rock iguana. They're
Okay.
native to like the Caribbean basically, and
Yeah.
they make really good pets if you have the space for them because they could be tamed down very, very well. They're very smart and they're very large and impressive. So if you could tame them down, they're excellent pets. It's like having a little dog or
Was it
something.
David Barczyk has the rock iguanas, right, on his that he was showcasing all the time. We can't have them in Canada.
No?
No, but you guys can't have Fiji
I
iguanas,
know.
so
Yeah,
it's
I
a
was just gonna say
trade-off.
that. Honestly, I would take the Fiji any day over the rock iguanas, but I love the arboreal lizards and the Fijis have like some of the best
Yeah.
color. They're not too big, so it's easy to keep. The messed up thing is that Fijis are so easy to breed, and the zoos here in the United States, San Diego Zoo, the Tampa Zoo, they produce so
Mhm.
many that they're just like stocked up on the iguanas they have, and they'll just start like basically throwing away eggs because
Oh
they
God.
just there's no space for them anymore. And I'm
Mhm.
like I don't understand the like why they wouldn't just allow the private sector to keep them, but
Yeah,
whatever.
the laws. Well, you guys have a bunch of laws too in Florida. So
Yeah,
yeah. What would
yeah.
you say is your favorite thing though that you work with out of all the different reptiles that you have?
And I mean,
Making you pick.
the geckos are definitely my favorite thing to breed because it's like the complete package. It's animal that you could put so much color and pattern into, but at the same size, at the same time, it has a good size where anybody could keep them.
Yeah.
So that makes it very easy to like. That's why they're so popular, you know. The thing about some of these bigger lizards, even blue tongues, like they require a lot more room. So sometimes
Mhm.
people that might live in a small apartment don't want to keep them, or
Yeah.
just like parents are turned off by them and they don't want to get their kids into them. But you see a crested gecko and it's like nice and cute, and like anybody can keep a crested gecko, right?
Yeah.
I think my favorite thing to breed is crested geckos, but if I could only keep like one reptile, I think it would be the tegus.
Okay.
Um, yeah, tegus are so amazing. If you have the ability to get a tegu, you have the space and you have the money and everything to get a tegu, like I promise you, you won't regret it. They're very personable, they're very intelligent, they're not hard to tame, and they're like a complete package. They're a big lizard, so
Mhm.
it definitely requires a lot of space. But as far as morphs, there's a bunch of morphs also. So it's like we can't keep them anymore here in Florida, but I've been,
Yeah.
that's one of the lizards that really, if I could only keep one, it'd probably be a tegu.
Which one do you prefer? The white and black, like the black and white, the blue, the red?
I like if we're talking about like pure locality stuff, I like the blues the best. But if
Mhm.
we're talking about the morphs, I had a buddy of mine produce these super crazy like red albino tegus,
Oh,
and
cool.
a lot of the blue tegus started through some sorry, the albino tegus started through a blue line of tegus, and they
Okay.
happened to just be head albino and they proved out. But those, when they get older, they turn like all white. But
Oh,
the
neat.
red albino tegus are like orange and red, and like they have so much color. They pop
Okay.
out so much. So I like those the best. Um, but yeah, I'm telling you, like those things are so amazing.
Well, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast today. Lots of information and lots of things to learn, and you are a wealth of knowledge. And I definitely appreciate having you on. And I look forward to seeing. So, when's the plan for the next show, the Gold Standard Gecko Club? Like, are you doing it next season? I guess because you had intended to just do the one show this year, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's most likely going to be just this one show this year. Uh, and we will, if you're interested in learning more about the Gold Standard Gecko Club, just follow us on social media. On Instagram, it's Gold Standard Gecko Club. And Facebook, it's the same. And we have the website, goldstandardgeckoclub.com. There's a little section there that you could sign up for, email notifications. We're not going to be posting much or talking about it much for now until I have kind of like something else planned.
Yeah.
And but it's most likely going to be in the beginning of next year. But I'm excited about it. If it's something that's different, so I definitely encourage people to take a look at what we got going on. Take a look at the website so you could see like the breed or the species standard and kind of get an idea of what we're planning on.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot again for joining us, and have an awesome Sunday. I'll pop you backstage, and I'll see you in a few minutes.
All right, Crystal, thank you so much.
Thanks. Well, for those of you who stuck around and those who are going to watch later, thank you very much for joining us. That was an awesome episode. Learned a lot of really good information. I'm sure people will find it very interesting, those of us that are breeding specifically, and then of course pet keepers as well. Next week we are going to have a break. There's not going to be an episode because there is the show up here near Ottawa, so I'll be sharing a lot of stuff on Instagram promoting it, but at the Ottawa Valley Reptile Expo. So I'll definitely be going there, and I'll be doing a lot of different like live videos and showing like the enclosure build off and such, and we'll be promoting that, and then we'll be back the following weekend for another episode of Coffee and Cresties. So have an awesome rest of your Sunday. For Canadians who have Monday off, enjoy the rest of your long weekend, and we'll see you again soon. See you later, guys.
Shake your dreams from your hair. I'm already there, right beside you.